I often get asked how many calls should I really be making a day to be able to hit my goal. And so maybe my goal is X or Y or whatever the case may be. Maybe it's a commission goal, maybe it's a volume goal, which I actually prefer. But my answer is always the same. You should constantly be growing not just your book of business, but your body of work, your productivity, right? And so if you think that it's really difficult right now to make 40 calls a day, well, maybe if you hit 35 today, maybe tomorrow you will hit 40 and then 45, and it's all conditioning. And so that's kind of like a laughable matter, right? For us to say that at this point, because we're talking about picking up a phone. About 15 years ago now, I was at the gym and I met a guy who used to run a marathon every single weekend. Now, it doesn't mean that there was a marathon actually going on in the city that weekend, but he would run 26.2 miles every single weekend, and twice throughout the week, he would run 10 miles each to keep himself in condition. Now, he did all this to train for the one event a year where he ran 100 miles in under 24 hours straight in the mountains every single year up north. He talked about, the kind of state that you go through where you're just so confused, you're running, you just have runner's high, and they actually have spotters there to make sure that people don't just run off of a cliff because they're just not in the right state of mind to be able to make those decisions, I guess, after a while, which is absolutely nuts to me. But he explained you start with 1 mile, you go to 2 miles or even 1.5 miles, and you slowly just condition yourself into a regimen that is constantly increasing and pushing back the goalpost until you get to a point where you feel comfortable constantly testing your body. So, that 10 miles, he didn't do 11 miles, he didn't do 12 miles during the week. He just kept it at 10, and then he would do 26.2, and then sometimes he would do 30. So the test every single weekend sometimes was a little bit longer if he felt like he really needed to push his body and test his limits. Especially when he was getting closer to the 100-mile race, he would constantly be upping the amount of distance that he was doing to condition his body for that. Now, us as salespeople, we don't have that problem where we have to, go through all of that agony, that physical agony. All we are doing is simply lifting up a phone a million times. But the thing that we need to condition, which is much the same, is our minds. Okay? So now fast forward a few years to about 12 years ago, and I was working in a gym, and one of my good friends told me, who was the top producer at these gym, told me, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Okay, I think at the time he said, I think I've got about 5 more years into me doing this position, because the grind was so hard. You're working all of these hours, you're trying to make something, you're out there hustling the floor trying to sell personal training packages, and it was just, he felt taxed. And he would take these week-long vacations every once in a while. He would come back fresh, hit it again, but he felt taxed. He thought that he had about 5 years left in him. He's still doing it. There is no excuse. There is not a finite amount of mental intelligence or conditioning that you can do to prepare you or to keep going, to maintain a level in sales. There's just not. Okay, you might get burnt out for a little while, you take vacation, you can come right back. That is a great thing. Your body is not going to fall apart with you doing sales. You still need to work out and do those things too to stay in good health. But sales itself, the act of making calls or showing up at somebody's door, is not going to, just completely destroy your body, obviously. So our job as salesmen is much, much easier than these guys that are training to do 100 miles in the mountains or anything like that. There are people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s still doing sales. So obviously, if you condition yourself to be able to do sales, you will be able to do it. And so really it's the mental, hey, how many calls am I going to do today? 5, 6. Oh, I did 75 yesterday, and I'm just mentally wiped out. I get it. I remember, kind of an embarrassing story actually, but I remember my first day of high school, and I went to military school, but it was my first day of high school. I came home. It was kind of like a weird dark orange sky kind of day or whatever. I don't know. It was kind of weird. And I was just so worn out. Mentally, I was just so worn out that I crashed I just laid down on my bed and I was out. Right. And so I had just joined, because in middle school I played trumpet. So I was going to play trumpet in the marching band at my high school, military school. And so I needed to go get a trumpet because in middle school I rented one and now I needed to buy one. My mom woke me up and I thought it was the next day. Okay, I thought that I had passed out, and now all of a sudden it was Tuesday, second day of school, and I'm going to go to school. And my mom's like, no, we're going to go ahead and take you to go get your trumpet at Sam Ash musician or music store. And the whole time in the morning for about 2 hours after I got my trumpet, going home, like the sun's setting, I thought the sun was just coming up, right? So this went on for a couple of hours. Then later I'm like, okay, I got my instrument and the sun is a little bit further down. I'm like, what is going on? What is going on? I was so mentally taxed that I didn't understand that. And so that's something that comes with sales, right? So after a long day of sales doing 75 calls, we feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just not up for this. But a year into it or 6 months into it or even 3 months into it, if you push yourself every single day to make 75, 80, 95, then 100 calls a day isn't going to bother you. It's not going to do anything to you. The guy who runs 100 miles up in the mountains can do 10 miles a day without a problem. You need to condition yourself and test yourself every once in a while of doing your absolute max so that you can maintain a 10-mile-a-day running regimen, in this case in sales. Make 125 calls one day a week and you will have no problem making 75 or 80 or 85 calls on all the other days.